Everybody, welcome. I'm now going to call to order this work session on the general government operating and capital budgets. Today is the 10th of October. We're on the record today from 11 to 4. It's now 11:08. And we're going to hear today about AO 2025-107, an ordinance adopting the 2026 general government capital improvement budget. We're also going to hear about, of course I lost the reference. We're going to hear about I don't have the number for the general government budget. And we will hear about the reorganization proposal by the administration. I don't have those ordinance numbers with me. So we'll start with introductions. Mr. President.
Cameron Perez-Verdia.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have
Aaron Baldwin-Day.
Zach Johnson. Jared Garter. Scott Meyer.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant on the phone. Mr. Martinez.
Present, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silvers.
Here, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallen. You there? Mr. Wallen. Okay, he may be busy at this point. We're also joined by the mayor and the administration, the OMG director on the Browse, Mr. Bill Falsey will be here soon, I'm sure. Municipal manager Wint Pearson, some other folks in the audience. So today we are.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Wallen.
Clipped out for a second.
Thank you. We will be hearing about the general government operating and capital budgets with some discussion about the reorg. Ms. Ball, you want to start us off?
Yeah, thank you. So in my role with Mr. Voland as co-chairs of the Budget and Finance Committee, I just want to provide a little bit of information for members, and then I will say a couple things at the end. Really, this is the administration's opportunity to present to us our budget. So a lot of us, this is the first opportunity we'll have, and the public will have to really deep dive into this. I will also say that sorry, I had blank for a little bit. Yeah, we'll cover part of it today. We'll cover the other part of it in 2 weeks. And then there is a third work session that is our work session, the Assembly's work session on potential amendments. And so as you're working through, just keep in mind questions you have, things that you may want to dig into. And then I'll also say there are a lot of departments, there's a lot of content here. And so I imagine there's going to be a lot of questions that may go way in the weeds. So I would ask members to consider if there are really detailed questions, to flag them here, but maybe there's follow-up offline just to keep us moving, because I know it's always a challenge to get through all of this content. So I think with that, I would just turn to the admin.
Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, everyone.
Turn on the mic.
You'd think after all these years, I would know that the green button means on. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the first work session on our proposed 2026 budget. And thanks in advance for all the hours that you're going to put in and time and effort on this process. Responsible and effective management of taxpayer dollars is one of the most fundamental duties of any mayoral administration. And in many ways, the municipal budget guides how we move forward together as a municipality and as a community. It's a blueprint for turning our values and priorities into action. Our proposed 2026 operating budget is a continuation from 2025 operations with minimal changes. That means we're remaining largely flat over last year, aside from required increases and adjusting for inflation. This budget proposal funds core municipal services and continues with targeted investments to help address our community's big challenges. My team and I are committed to building a stronger, safer, and more affordable community for all. To achieve this, our budget focuses on 3 main goals. 1, delivering quality and effective government services. 2, community safety and health. And 3, investing in our community's long-term future. We know our community wants safe neighborhoods, a vibrant downtown core, and well-maintained streets, parks, trails, and community spaces. So we're continuing investments in public safety to increase the number of sworn police officers and expand the use of technology. And we are investing in our community's long-term future and quality of life. That means community development and investments in parks, trails, libraries, housing solutions, and other steps to ensure Anchorage is an affordable place to live and an attractive place to do business. And I just want to say, looking at the members who represent Eagle River and areas to the north, when I say Anchorage, just short for Municipality of Anchorage, I mean everybody, all the communities within our larger community. But it's clear we can't meet all the needs of the community with the municipality's current revenue structure. Our budget relies largely on property taxes, and we are bound by the tax cap. My team began the 2026 budgeting process grappling with a significant budget shortfall. Thanks to the determination of our Office of Management and Budget team, affectionately referred to by some of you as the OMG department, we've patched that gap using a combination of one-time funding sources. That patch is temporary. These one-time funds won't be available next year. For now, we've narrowly avoided cuts in service delivery to Anchorage residents, very narrowly, very, very narrowly avoided cuts. And we received tens of millions of dollars in budget requests for more services and projects that we simply cannot fund. And I know you all have received those too from some of your constituents. We want to do more for our community, but we have lost a significant amount of outside funding over the last 2 decades. Many of you heard about this during OMB Director Browse's presentation at the work session last month. Over the last 10 years, we received about $1 billion less from the state than we received during the previous decade. And one data point really stands out. Back in 1984, the municipality received 29% of its operating budget from state funds. And that's just the operating piece. We also benefited from a lot of capital funding as well. That's left the municipality overly reliant on property taxes to fund our roads, our schools, our police, fire, parks, and trails, plus the upkeep of all this infrastructure. Year after year, we've asked property taxpayers to shoulder the vast majority of our bond package. So in addition to a flat budget proposal, you'll see our proposed bond package is skinny compared to the need. It's time to have a hard conversation as a community. If we do not address our revenue structure, our departments will face cuts, and we are preparing budget scenarios as part of that as well to show, where those cuts would need to happen. This is our community. It's up to us, all of us, to figure this out together. We must find sustainable solutions to fund the services our residents want and need and deserve. I'm looking forward to a productive discussion today about our 2026 budget proposal, and I look forward to engaging with the Assembly and the community in a broader fiscal conversation over the next several months. Again, thank you all for being here today and for the opportunity to say a few words. I will now turn it over to Director Browse.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chair and members, for having us here today to present our 2026 proposed budget, where I think we're in for a long day, but hopefully it'll be interesting. And we would expect, I think, a fair amount of questions around some of the discussion we'll have later in the day. We'll go through our agenda so that we can talk about what the steps for today will look like. There's a couple of choose your adventure moments in it. So we're scheduled today from 11 to 4. The intro would be the budget overview, where I sort of go over the sort of highlights and the changes within our 2026 proposed budget. And then traditionally what we do is go through individual departments and roll the directors through to sit and talk through any of their budget changes or operating adjustments. In light of the fact that the majority of the departments see no changes whatsoever within their budget, We thought that it would be interesting to focus the conversation in a separate way this time around. So what we're proposing to do is I will go through sort of the general overview of the individual departments to just walk through the technicalities of the budget adjustments. And we can talk about the reconciliation pages and what the detail is and how those budgets have changed. Most of it is attributable to labor change or to wage changes on the labor side. And so just identifying that that is where you will see the bulk of the continuation movement. The next piece would be if the conversation about the departments with me prompts any questions that you have specifically for the directors, we can either one, engage the directors in Q&A after this meeting, or invite them to the meeting on the 24th specifically to discuss any of those questions that may be outstanding. We do have later in the afternoon the directors for the health department, Director Rash and Chiefs Case Wilson, Shragi, I believe Parch from Fire Department, Parks and Rec, Maintenance and Operations, the Municipal Manager's Office and the Mayor's Office will all be available and here to discuss, one, their budgets and their changes, but also the public safety overview and the sort of process that we want to see happen as part of our 2026 budget, any of the programmatic changes in the public health and safety column of our operations. The next step would be to do an alcohol tax overview with the alcohol tax budget specifically and the technical portions of the alcohol tax budget, as well as Thea and Agnew Benben presenting on the Safe Anchorage program with the other public health and safety providers all in the room available to talk about that. And then go through, I know that many of you saw the ACE Fund work session yesterday, but follow on for that will be just to go through the ACE Fund proposal for 2026 as well. I think that if we go through that, we might take up the entire day, but I think it'll depend on questions. There's a middle section in there before we go to lunch, the history and mystery section, which is a break from what we normally do here, which is present all our budget detail and talk about what is contained within the budget. That is what came before us and how do we contemplate our next few steps going forward. Because I think one of the problems that we get sort of stuck in this existence in is that we don't have the opportunity to pull all the way back and look at what we're really trying to do across the board when we're working through a continuation budget process. We look at what's in front of us and say, okay, well, that's a change I guess we can make. Now what? Now what? But if we try and draw back to say, are we doing this the right way across the board? Should we be doing this differently? How do we compare to other communities? What are they doing? How are we different? How are we the same? I think we have opportunity for that analysis now. And you know, we're 50 years young, so we've got plenty of time ahead of us to do it. But if there are any concerns with the top line OMB review of the department detail, absolutely, we can invite the directors to come and answer questions, but specifically the large 70% of our budget directors will be here later in the afternoon to talk specifically about those things. Any questions on that? And for informational purposes, a work session on the 24th would consist of the utilities, the enterprises, ACDA, their associated capital budgets, as well as a more robust capital budget review with the departments who do the capital budget work, PM&E, Parks and Rec, traffic, here to have that conversation with members and any additional directors that you may want to have return to answer questions about their budgets.
I would just note that the Silvers join us in the room, Mr. Rivera join us on the phone.
This is for you. Thank you. So moving forward, you've seen this before. We go through this every time we talk about our budget process, but this is our budget map. And the top line is our capital timeline and how we work through our capital budget. And the bottom line is our operating budget process. Right now, we are in the blue section that says mayor policy at the line at the bottom of the page, you see it says mayor's proposed budget presented at the beginning of October. And so we are in that 2-month time frame between proposed and approved. So far, we've gone through some pretty interesting budget process revisions over the last year, specifically around the capital budget. And the recommendations made by the Assembly when we came in and sort of the goal to integrate community engagement earlier and make sure that the community councils have a functional feedback loop in terms of what projects they want. And I think that went very well this year. I know that Chelsea Ward-Waller and PM&E did a lot of work with the FCC to make sure that they felt like they understood what the changes were. And Chelsea can speak to more of that when we're in the work session on the 24th. But that is our timing for right now. Any questions on where we are? No. The budget goals for 2026 are pretty plain, I will say. They are very simple because delivering quality government services in the environment that we are in can sometimes be challenging. Making sure that our public safety is as robust and operational as possible. Repairing and maintaining critical infrastructure. These are not luxuries when you are resource constrained, and or they are luxuries when you are resource constrained, but they are foundational to our operations as a municipality. These are things that we have to provide as an entity. So focused on making sure that we can provide those things is where we are looking in this year's budget. The key investments continue some of the work that was done in 2025, continued stabilization of crisis response programming in Anchorage, and enhanced attention to streets, parks, and trails. That is part of the bond package and the pedestrian safety approvals from last year. You'll see those presented again in the capital portion of our budget. Continued revitalization of downtown. I know that there are summer activities planned for our parks and downtown area that Parks and Rec and some of our other departments will be able to talk about a little later, and specifically housing and community development. So you'll see some of that change within the organizational structure and also some operational adjustments to enhance what we're able to do around housing and community development. These numbers are the simple on the street talking point numbers that you might need. The 2026 proposed general government operating budget is $656.9 million in total appropriation. The reason it says total appropriation is because there's a little switch that sometimes flips back and forth between the budget numbers that we use. One is total budget. The other is total budget appropriation. And the difference between the two is the depreciation number. And Amanda ran upstairs to grab some AM support printouts for us, because I think one of the things I would also like to do today is walk through, as we talk about these numbers, match them up with what shows on the AM support, that document that you guys get attached to your assembly documentation, because it took me a few years, and maybe I'm a little more dense than some. It took me a few years to recognize that one page, it's one page this year, sometimes it's 3 pages, that document actually contains everything that's in here in short form. And so once you can see how to read that, it makes it very easy to see quickly what's happening to the budget in that year. And these numbers are all very obvious on the AM support. And so identifying them and showing you where they are, I think will make it sort of easier point of reference going forward. But the 656.9 is the total appropriation, and 666.17 is the total operating budget.
I have a quick question for Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, I think as we've been thinking about this, I'm also thinking of this is an education opportunity for those doing this budget cycle for the first time. Can you just briefly clarify? We have a bunch of ordinances and resolutions that were introduced. We don't need to go through them, but how do they relate to the budget book itself, and where should somebody focus at this point if they're trying to understand the budget?
Ooh, where should somebody focus if they're an assembly
I guess I
member?
meant what, those ordinances or the budget book?
Oh, for right now, yes, to follow along. Okay, so our main resources for the day will be the AM support document that Amanda will bring down to us shortly. And this is attached to your assembly documents that have been distributed on the agenda on Tuesday. The big budget book, if you have it, this budget book has all of the detail pages behind some of the pages that we're going to go through in this 100-page slide deck. And so when there's a question on one of the pages that's up on the deck, if you want more information, you might be able to find it in this book. If it's not contained within this book, then it's behind the computer curtain and we can get that information either via questions or follow-up information afterwards.
Farina.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a comment. I just emailed out the new updated slides from OMB. And yesterday I emailed links to the pages that Ona is likely to go over that detail what is in the summary that Amanda is getting. And then the day before that, I emailed that out, the links to all the documents online and also copies of the AOs. So those should all be in all the assembly members' inboxes.
Oh, no.
The budget is $175,000 under the tax cap. That is a rounded number. It's actually $175,528. And that total is listed also on the AM support. The total property tax increase over 2025 is $7 million total. As we get into more detail, we'll show what the result of all of those numbers look like. But those are the sort of simple top line details that I think a lot of people ask initially as to what our budget looks like for 2026. Any questions? So this is diving into the detail now. So when we look at our 2026 proposed budget, the comparison between 2025 revised, the April budget, and the 2026 proposed budget now, on the tax revenue, our non-property projection is $0.1 million less than 2025. So that's $100,000 off of our non-property tax revenues. The transfers from other funds is a $7.5 million reduction. And that is internal transfers between our governmental agencies and ourselves. So sometimes that is not a 100% revenue loss. It's a loss between the lines. Fines and forfeitures, we're projecting flat. The property taxes, you'll see the $7.4 million referenced on the page before. So there's a $7.4 million property tax increase between 2025 and 26. Program revenues brought in from our operations are at 700,000 less than 2025. Our investment and special assessments revenue is up by 5.1 million. And revenues from other governments is down by almost $1 million. Overall, these are just the revenue funding changes that are notable as part of our budget roll-up. So overall, it's not a lot of movement. And for the most part, the property taxes take up the bulk of the increase.
I have a question for Mr. Briswardia.
Just a clarification on revised, if you could just make sure we're all on the same page and what we mean by revised.
So the terminology for revised budget is the budget that we pass in April. So the language that OMB uses is proposed is the budget that's in front of you. We have proposed this budget to you. The budget that once you have taken action on it in November is the approved budget. And you will hear us say, oh, it's an approved. Oh, that's part of the approved budget. And that is a technical term to us. It is not just that you approved it. That means it is a specific time in our budget process. And the revised budget is our final budget. Outside of supplemental activity throughout the calendar year, our revised budget is our final budget that includes the total numbers for mill levy and where we actually landed. So what we want to do when we're having these conversations is make sure that we are comparing the most recent detail to the next detail. And so instead of comparing proposed to proposed, we want to make sure that we are taking the continuation budget track of revised to proposed so that you can see the full changes going forward.
So a document is being handed out. Do you want to note what it is? And do we have that available for members on the phone? Mr. Farina, this item, was it sent out?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, so what was just distributed is the AM support, which is attached to the general government operating budget document. And this should be included in all assembly documents. When people in the community go online, this AM support exists on that document. So you can look at this, through any of those mechanisms. But this document in the past is 3 pages long, 5 pages long, and involves a lot more transactional line activity because there are usually a lot more changes occurring in the budget, either as organizational changes are happening or as new programs and new revenue is being spent. I don't have my big giant spreadsheet, but this spreadsheet actually consists of about 14 pages of huge spreadsheet detail that is in and out of continuation budget, all detail done by hand in order to match up labor PCNs and costing, and how the continuation budget matches with any changes that came before it, the things that happen on a day-to-day basis at the municipality. All of those things have to be trued up and incorporated in our continuation budget. So when you're looking at this page, the simple numbers that people usually look for, the tax cap number is at the very bottom right of the page. So you can see amount over under the cap. And that shows you where the budget lands in terms of the property tax cap. The other detail right above it, the numbers that show 2026 proposed general government operating budget appropriation. That is the 656.9 million. And the total operating budget number is 2 lines above it at 666.165 million. And you'll see the depreciation number in the middle there. And that is IT depreciation. And you'll see that show up in IT's budget when we go through the budget detail. And so that is not an appropriated dollar amount. That's why the specification between what the dollar amount is that we are appropriating versus the total general operating budget can sometimes be confusing, but we try to use the same numbers in the same places for continuity. Any questions on funding sources? When we, go ahead.
Did you get your question? You'd asked to be in the queue.
Oh, thank you. I was actually just curious what investment other or special assessment happened to take us from 6.6 million to 11.7.
Let's find out. In our overview of major revenue sources within the budget book, it's detailed specifically. So that's the other part, is that this page exists in your overview and revenue summaries within this book. There's deep detail in these pages, just a flag of a mention on this page. So when you look at the overview of major revenue sources within the budget book, the investments are outlined on page, let's see. Oh, this will take too long for me to find it specifically, but that's a roll up and we can give you the exact detail of what it is. We'll get a question.
I can go
answered.
dig around. Thank you.
So when we are looking at this AM support document, you can see the top 10 lines are what is called the continuation budget. So if we're looking at the AM support and the top line is the revised general government budget total, the next 10 lines are everything that is rolled up into our continuation budget proposal. So the labor changes at $15.3 million, non-labor reduction of $9 million, the debt service reduction of 3.9 gets you to the continuation budget total of $659.7 million. So just walking through more of the AM support to show how that detail translates to all of the rest of this information that is presented. The impact of those revenue changes that we just went over means that there is a reduction in our property tax assessment per 100,000. The impact of the continuation budget with no additional growth outside of that means that our per 100,000 bill is going down by $4. So we had this conversation at the Budget Advisory Commission yesterday. Essentially, that means that based on this budget, the movement that residents will see in their property tax bills will come from assessment changes, not from property tax changes. Because as we see our property tax levy go down a little bit, if the assessments are going up, they're going to meet at the same midpoint and the property tax bill could be flat. If the assessments go way up while the 100,000 is going down slightly, they're still going to see a property tax jump on their bill. And so the way these things, integrate with each other is where the impact comes in. It is not because we are increasing our budget by X amount and it is all going to property tax payers. It is that the assessments are increasing, therefore the amount of property tax that you are responsible for within the giant kitty of our assessment pool, sounds terrible, is increasing. So there's a bit of a challenge in making sure that that's understood clearly, but
Question from Anna.
Yeah, and for members' benefit, I think the last two budgets that I've been involved in, the tax rate, at least in the arts, the center city was the same, or it nominally went down by a tiny amount. So really our tax rate, our tax mills have been pretty steady. But my question is, can you talk, you mentioned property assessments have gone up. Can you talk about residential versus commercial and industrial?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've seen over the last many years is that the assessments around residential property have gone increased greatly, but the commercial assessments have not. So we used to have a sort of different kind of tilt where commercial property had higher value and was sort of more of the revenue pool. But because of the transition in our times, I guess, and the lack of brick and mortar, we've sort of inverted that, and the value of residential is climbing and commercial is staying flat. So we are putting more and more responsibility on residential taxpayers than has been in the past because the assessment shift is occurring. I think that is part of the challenge of the crunch that people are feeling.
So I have myself in the queue there as well. And the assessment function, Jack is not here, but these are fairly automated procedures, right? They're based on market forces. They're based on assessments of sale prices that they can get a hold of, et cetera. And so this is not a factor that's juiced by policy, right? This is just essentially the best systematic approach to understanding. So when people talk about that shift that you're talking about, not between commercial and residential, but between the assessed value versus the levy is the part that we control. Essentially, the assessed value is the part that is just based on market forces. And so, and control is a generous statement when you contemplate the nature of our operation and how thin the margins are. Is that a fair assessment?
To the chair, that's correct. And it's not, that's one of the things, we are not special. That is happening throughout the country.
Right.
It is how the sort of operations of our world are changing, and our brick and mortar is less valuable than it was previously.
Well,
So,
yeah, and that's the commercial versus residential. I think is easy for most people to grasp after the pandemic and everyone started working from home and issues with keeping commercial properties full. Thank you.
The breakdown by department. So this is interesting to see because it shows the actual consumption of our budget by department. And historically, traditionally, and I think in most communities around the country, police, fire, and maintenance and operations tend to be some of the larger departments. Here, in Anchorage, police, fire, maintenance and operations, and our debt service make up 60% of our budget. And that is growing over the 10 plus years that I've been looking at the budget. It was 50% previously, now it's 60%. But this budget is actually the first budget I have seen where maintenance and operations jumps debt service. So it has almost always been police, fire, debt service. And now it is police, fire, maintenance and operations debt service. And that is a twofold factor. One is that our debt service went down this year. That is a nature of timing, potentially. One of the things that happens is the proposed budget happens in November, but we do a bond vote in April that's part of revised that adds debt service requirements to us. So that could change by April. But for right now, as part of the proposed budget, maintenance and operations was usually underneath debt service in terms of total percentage of our budget. So that I think is a slightly interesting switch. And the depreciation number you'll see called out there too. Those are sort of our major items that we don't necessarily have a whole lot of play in, the debt service and depreciation. But for the most part, the bulk of our budget is 60% in 4 departments or spend categories. And the rest of the universe breaks down into less than 5% of the budget total by department. So it's pretty lean in terms of where we're weighted.
So I have a question. Did we issue TANs this year?
The proposal is to issue them in 26.
So this is for going forward.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
So you'll see TANs appear in this budget. They did not appear in the 2025 budget. TANs is the tax anticipation notes that we issue as part of our borrowing program in order to make our property tax cash flow work. It's usually
Earlier, yes, it's to essentially pay the bills before the tax levy happens for the year.
And it's usually usually a pretty good deal for us in terms of an investment, because sometimes we actually make money off of the when it happens, we are able to accrue some interest and savings off of the deal that then turns into revenue. And so you'll see the TANs cost and the TANs revenue sort of dance with each other a little bit as we go through the budget. And it was one of the things, I think, in the 24 budget that caused a revenue challenge.
A bit of a fight, and it's about a $250,000 revenue point, I think, last couple times that it did happen. So, but it also makes sure we can pay our bills January through July. And tax anticipation notes. I don't know what the S stands for. Service.
Multiple.
Yeah, service.
And it's TAN at lowercase s.
It's, it's just essentially revenue we're able to collect financing for, because it's going to come in, so the market will fund us upfront.
So the key direct cost changes. Before we go further, don't try and math these up. They are not summary at the bottom. These are numbers with highlights as call outs. So they don't total, I think is the appropriate way to say that. The 2025 revised budget, we'll go back to the AM support document again. Here's the AM support document. Up at the top, 2025 revised budget is your starting point. And then you roll down the page. And so the 2025 revised budget number at the top of that is 657.3. And then we go through the one-time requirements reversed. It says 9.1. If you look on page or line 6, you can see these changes moving in and out, labor continuation, the debt service adjustment. So those are the changes that are occurring between the revised budget and the continuation budget total. Our continuation budget total comes to $659.7 million. And in order to get that budget across the line, we included $5.5 million of revenue from the ML&P sale fund. This is $1.7 million more than has been used in 24 and 25. And this is not ML&P restricted revenues from proceeds of the sale. This is a operating reserve account that was cash on hand at ML&P at the time of the sale, that as the parent organization came back to us and was an operating account that has sat in our books for a while. In 2024, Director Lechner accessed that to pay our PERS liability. And while it is not bound by the same rules and restrictions as the proceeds, AKA into ML&P debt, into municipal debt, or directly into the trust, we still treat it the same way. So we are trying to restrict the spend to items that are related to the ML&P sale, debt associated, or for the municipality at large, or it can go into the trust. But for the time being, what we're thinking of it as for this year is fund balance replacement. Because if we had access to a current ACFR with known fund balance, we likely would have talked about using fund balance for this. Over the last 25 years, our average fund balance use on an annual budget is about $6 million. And that's a roll up of all funds. It's not just the general government fund balance, but it is majority general government fund balance. And those options that are sort of leveraged either by the assembly or the administration to say, well, we need this to pay this bill or to cover this cost. And so we have this left over from the previous year. We're going to put it over here and use it to make the budget whole, or complete, I should say.
Is this the same fund that there is a proposal already on the agenda for us to use for portions of the debt of the Performing Arts Center?
Through the chair, no, it is not.
It's a different.
So that you are taking action on is the funding that is restricted by as proceeds of the sale. So the deliberation would be, is this considered debt of the municipality in order to authorize that transaction?
Okay, and then the second question is, and maybe I can get this, well, I'll ask you offline.
This fund, we expect, it's not a recurring fund. It's not renewing. There's no money going into it. It is the operating reserves that sat in a bank account for a while. It has accrued some interest over time. It has been used to spend to pay the ML&P PERS liability. And so there is a balance on it, but we're waiting for the ACFR in first quarter to actually know what the full balance is. We project that outside of this $5.5 million, that there's probably another $6 million remaining in the fund. And for the time being, we are reserving that allocation in case we need it to pay for other secondary budget items that we will go through that are not included in the 2026 proposed budget because of the nature of timing, but we know that they will become costs in 2026. So that's just a little insight into the way that we're looking at this. Bond O&M changes at $200,000. The Eagle River Parks and Rec service area had some individual changes, and the Girdwood Board of Supervisors also made some individual changes that impact their levies, but not the area-wide. And the overall 2026 proposed budget is $666.2.
Ms. Barley has a question. Oh,
Yeah, this is actually just a statement, but correct me if I'm wrong. I just did the math. So 657 million last year, proposed 666.2 million this year. I was looking, inflation this past year has been about 2.8%. The actual rate of increase on this 657 to 666 is about 1.3 or 1.4%. So I just want to note, this is below actual inflation.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm just curious what the increase in Eagle River Parks and Rec was.
New fund. Excuse me. New. There's a position change. Sorry, it's on the bottom of the AMS.
Got it. Yeah, she showed it.
Okay. This is our pie chart. You'll see this every year, I believe, in our overview. And so this shows us where we get our money from, and the next pie chart is where we spend it. So the big blue section of this graph, or of this pie chart, is property taxes. So we're at about 59% of our budget is property taxes. That is actually well within line of what our property tax proportion has been for the last 20 years. When you look at our historical spreadsheet, we usually run between 55 and 58 on that proportion of our budget. And the other items are sort of pretty standard. We've got taxes within the tax limit at 13%, federal and state revenues at 3.6%. The intergovernmental charges, $33.3 million intergovernmental charges. We're going to talk about those too. So fun. And you'll see the fund balance reference there as 4.2 million at 0.6%. That fund balance is part of the confusing terms of fund balance, because one of the things that means is LRSA fund balance. So when LRSAs and service areas have revenue in their bank accounts and they move it from their savings account to their operating account because they're planning to spend it in the upcoming year, that is considered a fund balance use. So when you're looking at the AM support document, the third column from the right is fund balance, all GG. And that is the roll up of how and when fund balance is being used and where. And that can tell you when the LRSAs are, moving money in or out, or where the fund balance is coming from, just as a point of reference, so that fund balance is not all one thing in one account. It's all funds, all balances.
My question is, so most of this is under the tax cap, because this is operating budget. And I see there's other taxes in the limit, and then it's outside limit. So I'm just wondering, for all the other ones, like the top left there, are most of those generally under the cap, or are those outside? I'm just trying to understand.
The taxes, property and taxes in limit calculation, both of those are under the cap. Everything else, I believe, is outside the cap. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like mostly other types of revenue.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
So this is where we get our revenue, and this is how we spend that revenue. And here's the magic. It's real budgety. If you look at the large parts of these slides, back and forth, property taxes, salaries and benefits, the reason for that is when we are budgeting and we have known recurring costs, we like to use recurring revenue. Because otherwise we are making bets on unstable revenues that we don't really have assurances that they will be coming in on a recurring basis. And when it comes to labor and benefits and a stable workforce, we want to make sure that we are funding our recurring revenues with recurring costs with recurring revenues. And that is sort of a general premise across the board. If you know you're going to have ongoing costs, you want to have the revenues to match it. So one of the reasons we are constrained is that we know that our increases will only come at inflation or less based on the property tax cap. If we don't have revenues available outside of that controlled formula, then we have to maintain our costs within these bubbles. So the danger of using one-time revenue for labor positions or growing programs is that they may have to be cut the next year when that revenue goes away. So seeing the property tax revenue, which is our major stable source of revenue, line up with our salaries and benefits is a good thing. Overall, the other services, non-labor.
One second. Yes.
Go ahead.
Cameron.
Yeah, I just want to understand something. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to go back to the fund balance conversation for a second. Because all of these sources are earned revenue this year, and the fund balance is not earned revenue, right? Fund balance is previously earned revenue that we're utilizing. Is that correct?
So correct, but this is not earned revenue for this year. This is the revenue that we are budgeting.
I see. Okay.
So we put the plan together to say, this is what we plan to do in 2026, and this is how we intend to do it. We're going to use 0.6 amount of fund balance in order to do it.
Okay.
And that is actually a very interesting point about our full budget process. November is our proposed and approved process. but we don't know a lot of information that is in our budget that we need to know in our budget at that point in time. So November is based on previous and actuals to date. And we make projections based on what we know at the time. There are plenty of things right now that we do not know that we will need to know and that we will know by April of our revised budget. We are currently in active labor negotiations with a bargaining unit that impacts 3 of our actual personnel units. We're working with AMEA right now to get through their CBA process, but their wages impact both non-reps and executives. And so there are no wage increases for AMEA, non-reps, or executives included in this budget until AMEA is closed. It's not entirely true. There's a 1.5 continuation for AMEA as part of their ongoing CBA if there were to be no new CBA going forward. But outside of those things, those 3 work units are not included in this budget because of the nature of timing. That is a significant dollar amount overall, but we know what that dollar amount will look like, and we know how we will have to recover for it by revised. And so we have that in our parked file of these are things that are coming that we must accommodate. We cannot do it legally as part of this budget right now. So there's steps to the process, and this is our projection, and revised becomes our actual.
I have a question then that follows on that too, actually. In the budget, is there a detail of the fund balance as you see it?
There is in the 6-year fiscal, but also it's not in here. No, it's not in this slide deck. There is information as to how the ACFR represents it, yes, and to how those numbers are currently known. I have been looking at the budget for more than 10 years, so I can see what the numbers are supposed to look like when they will be corrected, and we will get them next year. And there is fund balance available. We just need the ACFR to represent the legal balance of the appropriate accounting of our documentation before we can actually spend it.
And so I think that it would benefit members to have that detail called out somewhere. So maybe we could get that to it. And then again, that's an area we can talk about offline. I have some thoughts. Now, to your point about reserving certain wage increases for after AMEA is done and really for Q1, because you just don't know yet, you can't legally be there. The Assembly branch put forward a number of targeted salary increases on its ongoing effort to provide parity between the branches for parallel work classifications. And we recognize that those were not included in the budget. And my first question back to our team was, well, did they provide increases to their similarly situated staff? And the answer was no. So I didn't really have any heartburn, because fair is fair, right? If it's across the board, then it feels reasonable. But of course, that raises the question, if we have a kind of spreadsheet for after Q1 or during Q1 where we're looking at other non-reps, are you intending to ensure that the Assembly's non-rep balancing increases are part of that conversation, so that we have that fair is fair conversation at that time?
Well, as the appropriating body, I think the conversation is ultimately with yourself. But yes, they are on the list of considerations for costs that have been requested,
Yep.
as well as the $30 million of
other
requests that the
things.
department's made and every other item that is still outlying. One of the challenges with this proposal at large is that there's little to no movement, period.
No, I understand that. And that's why, again, I didn't raise a flare across the bow this week of, oh my God, look at it, because they treated us fairly. But if there is a place in the budget that you're planning at Q1 to look at the fund balance, look at the revenues, and address other labor increases, then the request is, for fairness sake, to also consider ours, so that we don't find ourselves in a position having to utilize that power kind of just bluntly to ensure that our team, that we're part of the conversation and we can continue the fair is fair conversation.
Yeah, and in light of the fair is fair conversation, I will tell you that our process on our side was to tell our operating departments to manage within their budget. If they have changes and want to see adjustments, then they need to realize it with the revenue that they have available to them right in front of them, which is when we go through the department detail, you'll see there are specific departments who made choices to cut existing vacant positions, to rehab whatever their organizational structure was in order to make their operations more efficient based on the sort of vacancy factor and the operational challenges over the last few years. I think that that is what we are really looking at for the most part is, do all of these departments have what they need to do what they need to move forward? Should we make adjustments with what they already have in front of them? Because additional revenue outside of what we currently have is not likely, considering the demands that we are going to have to contractually meet as
Right.
part of the revised budget.
No, I understand that, and I don't know how to say this to be just as barbless as possible, that we have to continue the work of equalizing our branch staff pay. I mean, they're not all the same. You and I've talked about this. Positions are not always one-to-one, but in the one-to-one analysis, there's sometimes a difference of $50,000 a year in pay relative to the position. And so that's the place where the branch has been focused on that work. And it's impossible for us to take within our budget to do that because the needs are high. And so that's where the assembly will, at the Q1 process, have to be mindful of that part of the conversation. And that'll be my last foray into this whole project. And I'm just putting a mark on the table now that fair is my hope we see this process throughout. And our fair is like a microscopic pool compared to the whole, because we're not the 3,000, we're just the 50 or 30 people that we are. 30.
If I might add something, Mr. Chair, this is, I mean, to the extent that this really concerns non-rep staff, we've had a long, ongoing conversation about the fact that that issue is across the municipality. The like $50,000 disparity for doing the same work, or
Right.
you take a promotion to a supervisory role and you take a pay cut.
Right.
All of those problems are true across all the departments. So part of the reason that we haven't done piecemeal increases for individuals is because we've acknowledged that that's a problem we have to tackle as a whole. So no, it's, it's a problem, we know it's a problem. And so I would say we have no intent of doing it in a way that disenfranchises or leaves certain employees behind. And to the extent that we do it, our goal is absolutely to try and look whole scale at all of the non-rep positions across the municipality who all are there's troubling currents through all of that class of employees.
That's good.
So
And that's the part I just want to make sure that the assembly's tiny little pool is part of that conversation. So thank you. It doesn't feel tiny when you're looking at a budget with no breathing room. I get that. And at the same time, that's it. Thank you all.
Okay, financing sources, financing uses, the org chart adjustment, just the split out of community development and public works in its reporting structure to the municipal manager. And if there are specific questions about sort of the process in that, I think Ms. McPherson might be able to answer them. But this was part of the alignment of departmental operations to support the mayor's vision on movement for housing and community development.
And I would just add, Mr. Chair, that this is really twofold. It's about efficiency and how we operate. Right now we have the public works lead, Mr. Cole Hayes, nested below Mr. Wilbur. And honestly, that's not how it functions realistically. Both of those gentlemen really lead their teams. And I meet with both of them as though they are direct reports. So this is in part practical, it matches reality. And this is in part aspirational in that having the teams nested together specifically who are involved most heavily in the mayor's housing agenda under the community development lead makes sense moving forward. The public works team then carries parallel priority agenda items of snow removal and also of road safety, really. So that's kind of where in the design and maintenance of roadways. So practical, also ideological.
A couple questions here. This actually came up at a community council last night, Fairview. They asked if something like this was happening without knowledge of this existing. So I think it's timely. Ms. Baldwin Day and then Mr. President.
Yeah, I'm curious about how these two sort of subunits are going to relate to each other. And I think part of my question comes from just the recognition that it's really difficult to talk about housing and not segue that conversation into transportation. And so I'm curious about what the plan is for coordination among when, at least visually, it looks like those functions are being separated and siloed from one another.
It's a good question to the chair and member Baldwin Day. I think they will continue to collaborate as closely, honestly, as they do practically now. And I would say that that's true of many of our functions, right? Like we can't talk about road safety without talking about policing, and we can't talk about road safety without talking about transportation. And so in many of the things that we do, we have the intersectional functions that have technically separate reporting chains of command. As it's not depicted in here, but our enterprises and utilities report to Mark, to our deputy municipal manager, before they report to me. And so I think that I am confident in the collaboration, that cross-functional collaboration continuing to happen as it needs to on certain issues. Even though we segment the reporting relationship, because it does now across a variety of different types of critical functions and projects at the municipality. And so it's really, you can kind of see this as like almost the housing team and the transportation team, but it's obviously not really that entirely, right? We have all kinds of other things embedded in each of these teams that are not specific to those two functions. And so it's thematic to try and have, again, leads who are tasked with some of the mayor's primary priorities, but it certainly is not exclusive. And again, I don't anticipate that it will impact, and I don't intend for it to impact the level of cross collaboration that does happen between those teams now on some of these critical issues.
Yeah, I think I'm just aware that collaboration has been tenuous in some cases already, and so I think I'm just curious how this kind of restructure will impact some of those challenges. So happy to have a further conversation about that if you'd like.
Mr. President.
Yeah, I think I need you to take a step back because you started with the rationale of why, but can you just go back for me and just explain the reorg first? And then I have a question, but what was it and what is it now?
Absolutely. It's a good question through the chair to member Beresford. Yeah. So currently, you can see these blocks as human beings. So the block that says community development, that block is currently Mr. Lance Wilbur, and his title is the Planning, Development, and Public Works Director. And he currently supervises all of the blocks that are below him in this list. So he supervises development services, that's Mr. Greg Soule, planning, that's Melissa Babb, real estate, that's Tiffany Briggs. And then he also supervises public works, which is Kent Colhayes. And so again, and then Kent in turn currently supervises maintenance and operations, project management and engineering, and the traffic engineering team. So this is removing a layer of middle management. It's removing that Kent, Lance, Shay chain of command, which again, we find operationally redundant. And then it also is allowing more focused attention from that community development block on those three departments that are most critical for housing related work.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's it.
Ms. Silvers, myself.
Can we just go back historically a little further? Because I know that the last administration did some major changes in this departmental structure. So can we go back a little further and talk about that?
I will start just by saying through the chair to Member Silvers that when Mr. Falsey joins us, he can show us the historical look back of organizational charts through time, because he did a giant research project when we were coming in to sort of look at what does that look like and what has it been over time and why has it changed and what have the differences been. And I will say that historically, this column in particular has been one that moves back and forth depending on administrations.
And I think I could add in the Berkowitz administration, when Ms. Brass and I were back in City Hall, this was totally different, was a flavor of the same kind of program. There was a community development lead who sat in the mayor's office, and he supervised a different grab bag of departments: library, parks and recreation, development services, planning, and real estate, but not the public works departments. He also supervised cultural venues, And gosh, what else? Is there anything else I'm forgetting that Shooty had?
He had the I-team then.
The I-team.
Yeah.
So there have been a variety of different reshufflings of the deck. I honestly don't remember right now sitting here all of the reshufflings that may have happened in the administration of Mayor Bronson. I know that a significant move was made to move departments under the municipal manager that had previously reported through the line up to the position that Mr. Shooty held in the Berkowitz administration. But it has been reshuffled several times in the last 10 years.
And through the chair to member Silvers, there are about, I mean, it's easy to sort of concentrate them into two basic categories of operations. One is the premise of the sort of Office of Economic and Community Development, where you have community development and quality of life items like library, venues, things like that. So you have a cultural component of the development. And then there is the public works, maintenance and operations, community development vision, which is the functional and operational planning, maintenance and operations. And so they tend to just move back and forth to some degree between like characterizations that look a little bit like that. I know that the Bronson administration had specifically reintroduced the building services supervisor, and that I think was a standalone. So when we came in 24, there was the building services and public works and community development. So it was a bit of a efficiency in the 25 proposed, and I think that this carries forward on that operational efficiency to line out exactly what the duties are of the departments doing that work. But we can get Falsey's big historical paperwork and share that.
So I have a couple of thoughts on this as well. And I would note that this slide is a discussion of AO 2025-110, which is the ordinance that was introduced in our last meeting for public hearing, both on the 21st and the 4th. So I have kind of two categories to talk. I want to follow up a little bit on what Ms. Baldwin-Day was talking about, that there has been a concerted effort since probably 2019 to whip the conversation about how you can't discuss land use without discussing road use, that the land use functions and the transportation functions have been in conflict, in particular in certain parts of town, very dramatically for generations. And we're trying to solve that. And you continue to see our partners at the state continue to have their road and transportation planning completely ignoring the fact that human beings live within 10 feet of their major federal highways. And so it does appear in some ways the potential that the separation gets firmed up here. Now, we've heard that that's not the intent, that there's cross-pollination and people work together. It's in one building, although the building in some ways is diagnostic of the problem because it too is a catacomb. You can't find what you need when you go in there because it's like a maze. But I wonder if you all can think about some way to signify or identify in the ordinance, if not in the drawing, some linkage between transportation planning and neighborhood planning so that we have a clear designation of the link somehow. Doesn't have to be in the picture, it can be in the language. But if you can all think about that as we move towards final action on this, it probably would resolve a number of tensions that for sure will be part of the conversation. So you've said that it exists because of cross-pollination. Let's figure out a way to say that in the code or in the pictures, is my suggestion. Thoughts?
To the chair, we're happy to take it under advisement. I definitely cannot correct any concerns we have about DOT or the floor plan at Tudor Elmore as part of this. But I am happy to consider how we might better signify the intended synergies between the two teams at Tudor Elmore. And I realize it's probably easier for me to say this than for you to hear it in some ways, because to me, this is how the teams have been functioning to date, because we have two very strong seasoned supervisors in those roles right now who have been managing projects beneath them. So acknowledge that there may be concerns about how it is functioning that we should take up as a separate conversation. But to the extent that I think that this org chart division unto itself is going to adversely impact synergies, I don't think it will. But we will take it under advisement into how we present it.
Yeah, thanks. It's so say it, hear it, see it. Now let's see it. Yeah, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to add that this is something coming from me in terms of this kind of collaboration. I came into this role looking very closely at what is the best way to organize these departments. And we've had a lot of conversation and discussion about that, and putting forward that direction in a way that is understood and actionable by the teams is a priority to me.
Thanks. Yeah. And it's like I said, say it, we hear it. Now let's see it in the document somewhere about when everybody's thing. And now that you spoke up, Mary, I do have the second part of my question really in some ways is for you, but it's really the team, and it's aspirational, I think. And it kind of relates to this. I'm sure you have heard some advocacy for what's being called a housing official, similar to a building official, but on steroids, someone who can really get in and deeply tackle these challenges that we have in our internal systems to make sure we're starting to make major progress towards the 10,000 homes plank. And I recognize that this budget has no room for that. I also recognize the mayor has a unique position in sitting on, I think, what they call the HLC or some of the other organizations that have been deeply involved in the housing space. And so I'm hopeful that if you are hearing that out in the community, and it's not just me, that there's a kind of a conversation that's taken from here to the HLC group, the funders group, and ask them if it makes sense for them to pitch in for a single position that you could kind of shape and drive. Somebody can be the chief steering officer in the department that can work with the manager, can work with the department heads to get the blockades out of the way.
Thank you for raising that issue, Mr. Chair. You know, this has been a topic of focus of conversation among us before actually taking office, is how best to ensure that the priority of housing happens. And we have had conversations too with some outside entities about funding a position, what is the right position given the skill sets we have, and what kind of balance. On the one hand, it can, you know, to have someone completely outside of operational duty, to have someone who has a balance of operational duties. You can end up focusing on one or the other. And, you know, this is a unique organization, as you know, the municipality is. It's not quite the same as most corporate organizations. We have an assembly, for example, and public process and all that other stuff. And I will say that this is such an important area, housing, that we have more than one person working on it. You know, we have a team of people and ongoing collaboration, you know, with others. So this is an area we continue to discuss and look at, in timing wise, resource wise, outside partner wise. It's very much under consideration.
Good enough. Thank you. Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate this conversation. And I think, it was over a year ago, we talked about kind of what that policy team might look like. My suggestion at that time was having someone who does focus on housing and transportation. And I think you guys have actualized that in Mr. Downey, that position. It is worthy of a discussion, but two things I want to put on the table. One is the community development director could be that person, could be the one steering those conversations if given the right directive. And in many other cities, the planning director actually is that person. And so I don't know that that's the right answer for our city. Our planning director is doing a great job. But I think it's in many ways, I've said this before on the record, I think sometimes this city has lost its way in terms of actually writing plans and implementing our plans and understanding the connections between those two things. And so it's unfortunate, and it's something that we've really had to try to fix over many years, and it's been a bumpy road. But just to say, one way that many cities have solved that problem is because all of these things are related, housing, transport, and that's what the planner's job is to see the connections between these systems. And so I would also offer that continuing to strengthen the planning department is one way to achieve that.
So I would just respectfully disagree to a point. Like, planning's job is generally to build plans. Engineer's job is to make the plans engineered so they can be built. And the building official is like the perfect model. This is the person who has high executive authority to streamline and make things happen. And that's on the building side. So maybe it is like a planning function, but it's a planning function with exceptional authority to make things happen, not the workaday stuff. But again, I think the administration, the mayor said it plainly, they are really looking at this stuff. And this isn't a spot for the assembly. I just wanted to make sure that what I'm hearing in the community is heard here so that, it's part of the record. But that is the tension, right? Planning, construction, who's actually the one that gets the job done? It's all of us together.
Okay. Also, just as a note on the org chart, in response to part of the conversation last year from membership, the note about the legislative branch organizational chart per code is referenced at the bottom of the org chart now. And the legislative branch org chart is included in the departmental detail. The next item is our budgeted position review. So this is the transition between our 25 revised and 26 proposed head count. And it's a relatively small change list. The bulk of this personnel transition is made up of the move and separation that we just talked about of community development at Public Works. So that -9 up at the top of the page and the +9 at the bottom of the page is that department move. The rest of these are identified within the department details that the changes were made in, and most of them are adjustments for positions that were made with existing budget. So as part of the budget proposals, departments brought forward reimaginings of how their organizational structure would be laid out. And so there were a couple of changes in and out, but other than that, there were also some supplemental changes throughout the year between revised and proposed that included increased personnel at the permit center, I believe for code abatement and for one other item. But on this slide, the detail is not included on the very bottom, but in your budget book, the page includes all of the personnel change detail so that you can read each of those adjustments by department. So overall, the increase is an 8 PCN increase for the budget. Okay, capital summary. So this is our 2026 capital summary. This includes our bond proposal, but also the other revenues that the municipality projects to be coming through in terms of our capital projects. This is very different than it has been in the past, and it's different for 2 reasons. One, it's different because the bond amount is actually smaller than it has been in the last few years by a very specific design. But the other thing that is significantly different about our entire capital budget book and our capital proposal moving forward is this. This slide is our capital summary from 2025. So this is the traditional way our capital budget book has looked. We include bonds, we include a state column, federal, and other. This is to identify where the sources of funds for these projects are coming from. But we know that these funds are not realized ever in the last many years, and we can talk more about that as we go forward. But this body and the mayor, and I think the community, has been asking for a little more clarity and transparency in what and how we present what's actually happening on our capital side. And so instead of treating this as a request list that we hope will be made, we are treating this as the actual document that you can look at to see what is happening on the capital front in Anchorage. And to do that, it means that we should reflect the money that we believe will actually be achieved and spent for these projects. And that means that no state funds will be requested or realized for any of these projects. Conversations with our legislators has led us to believe that that is accurate. There is no money for Anchorage, and we should not expect any, so we aren't. And we have removed the existence of state funding from these revenue projections because we don't think that they will come. If you look back through our budgets, that state column over time usually lands somewhere between $100 and $200 million in the wish list. But overall, we have seen none of that money come through the capital budget in a significant way over the last 10 years. The federal column includes project management and engineering and public transportation match dollars. And the other column includes any number of revenue sources, but mostly it is capitalized lapse revenue, match revenue from outside entities, private sector donations, levy funding within M&O. So it's outside of the bond, but it is not included as part of our traditional tax cap formula. So when you look in the detail pages in the capital book, you can see the identification of where all of these fund sources would be coming from on the other column. But what we're trying to do is also include projects that we know have other funding available outside of the state or municipal dollars that traditionally aren't necessarily seen in our capital budget. So on the Parks and Rec budget, you'll see call outs for, small dollar improvements to some of our fields and parks that are through the work of the Parks Department getting grants to do those things, as opposed to just a state legislative request or a bond. So it's significantly different, and you'll see this in the capital roll-up as we move forward, but that's a big change. So this is our pie chart of funding sources for capital improvements. We've got the bulk of it is bonds. The next pie is federal funding, and as we talked about, the other column of private sector and other kinds of capitalized match funds. And then this is where that funding goes to, the kinds of projects that we are spending that money on. So roads and transportation makes up the bulk of it at 68%. And Parks and Rec, public safety, information technology are all relatively small dollar. Our facility improvements has been, I think, improving in the last couple of years as far as getting more money into some of the deferred maintenance, but there's still miles to go.
That's probably.
Thanks. I want to point out, I did take a quick glance at the capital list, and there are specific parks projects, there's AMETS projects, and there's the annual program, but I didn't see really, or unless I missed it, any specific kind of road and drainage projects. So I wonder, one, can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit? And then two, what is the initial thought for members' benefit on moving from here to the bonds as far as, amendments or putting projects on the bond? Thanks.
So, when we were working through our conversation on what the capital budget could, and should look like, we get the proposals from our departments that say, these are the items that we either need or that we know are next in line and can be worked on, or that the community wants to have worked on. It's any number of this is why we're requesting these lists. And you saw all of those items in the 120-day memo. We included all of the departmental requests in the 120 memo so that people could see everything that the departments were moving forward as their position. And the PM&E column in particular with ARTSA and road projects, but also with area-wide projects, I think their full request list was somewhere in the $74 million amount. The total bond request list that we got from our departments was over $100 million. I think it was $104 million. And we are putting forward $48 million, $48.9 million in our bond, which is about $10 to $15 million lower than recent history. And project management and engineering was a very specific consideration, because when you look at their ranked list of projects that could and should be done, many of them up at the top are items with match funds, items that are construction projects that are moving and require municipal participation. But the bulk of them are required annual maintenance programs. They are flooding and glaciation programs. There's our signal program, our lighting, it's all annual programs, and you'll see that in the capital budget roll-up. And when we were making the determination about where do we provide the funding on our bond list, what do we ask of property taxpayers, and what are we comfortable with? When we started getting down into the community portion of the picking and choosing road projects, it would have been sort of a game of we can go to here, we can go to here, we can go to here. We know we need these annual maintenance funds in order to keep the city rolling and our employees in their seats. And so our position is, this is what we know we need. We need to have a conversation with everybody else to figure out what they want outside of this. And so when it comes to the community projects, the road, the neighborhood issues, we're looking to you guys to say, what do we want to add to this list? It shouldn't be a, free-for-all consideration of let's put everything in my district back into the bond. But it is what is really important within the district that you represent, and what are they telling you they want to see, and which of those projects would you like to see moved ahead? Can we do that and then add them to the list for consideration? But I think part of this conversation from the mayor's perspective is we are going to do what we need to do and then listen for the feedback on what else should be done as we have this conversation moving forward. So part of the capital budget process is making sure that the program and the out years is lined up and figuring out where and how that funding will occur. And so I think that's the conversation to be had over the next couple of weeks.
Just to reiterate then, the list you put forward is your baseline list, and there is some room, you're saying, for district priorities if they reach a level of agreement of all of the parties, not a Christmas tree, but some level of room.
Ideally, yes.
Okay, Ms. Briley.
Thanks. Yeah, and I would also encourage members to go back to the essentially I think the revised budget is probably the best one from this year, 2025, or to the CIP, the 6-year rolling list, because there is a rolling list of projects, many of which have probably been on there for a long time, might have gotten shifted forwards or backwards. So yeah, again, the statement is there's not a lot of room, but I would also start with that list and see what was either supposed to be on there or what you've heard is a long time priority, and that would be a place to start. Thanks.
And through the chair, I will also identify that this is a good time to highlight one of our sort of confounding operational problems about this reality, and that is that the bulk of our PM&E staff is funded via these bond projects. So when you look at the headcount in PM&E, I believe we have 5 staff. But we all know that there are more people than 5 that work in that department. And that is that because they are not funded through our operating budget, they are funded through our capital items. And so they bill to these projects like a contractor would in order to make their wages whole. And the fewer projects we have, the fewer billables there are, and the fewer employees we are able to retain and keep on staff to do the work. I think that is not how it has always been. It is a budgetary constraint and a accounting constraint based on the way we do the work. But if we were able to find resources to actually pay for those employees outside of bonding capacity, then we would have a different sort of structure of annual program maintenance and contractual work.
I don't know if now is the time to talk about CASA or if you have a specific slide for that before the mayor goes real quick.
Sure.
No, you don't. Okay, so yesterday I briefed that there are a few members, more than 2, less than 4, who have been in discussion about CASA and its approach for this year. And I think generally speaking, there is agreement among the folks who have had some strong concerns that the program as the projects as programmed in this year's plan, this year, are acceptable. There may be some slight additions proposed, and that the conversation about the actual CIP or CIB, the 5-year, that we're grateful you did the first round of work on, don't really meet the mark with the work collaboratively with the group that's doing it. And so there may be some conversation about editing out the 5-year part. We can never keep them square. For the purpose of allowing the group that is now convened and working to put together the first one, because there's fear that the first one that goes in becomes a kind of a visualized, this is what we're doing to all the members of the community outside of the working group. And so that's kind of the gist of the conversation as it's evolving right now. So there's been a lot of positive feedback about the new working group. So I want to thank everybody for getting to that part of the process. And we talk about it in terms of bonds, but it is a service area, so there could be a levy. And the question that I have is, would it be of value to approach a service area master plan conversation, some kind of an element that actually starts to look at how it could all work, that could be funded with a small levy as opposed to a bond, because you can't fund, planning projects with bonds, but there could be some resources generated in a one-time basis to actually pay for professional services to get this thing humming like a fine-tuned engine, as opposed to this continuous fits and starts because we are limited in our resources. So that's a conversation that's kind of happening. What are your thoughts?
Well, to the chair, I was going to ask if Ms. McPherson has any thoughts on it, mostly because of the direct relation to PM&E and how they're managing the program process. I'm not involved in the program process, but I think that
Right.
seems
The
fine.
challenge with PM&E being in charge is, when every problem is a nail, the hammer is the tool you always look to. And so PM&E's general function is the big roads and the big infrastructure. And that's where the amenities piece seems to fall to the wayside. And so there's the theory, but Ms. Winfierson.
Yeah, to the chair. I mean, I think it's an interesting concept. It's the first time I've heard it. So I think that, I think you're right to identify the fact that there is a lack of specific resource support for CASA's task, right? Because right now they're staffed largely by Mr. Colhayes, because it's a broader question than just, the PM&E function, because it is broader than ARTSA. It's broader than where we normally bond for roads. And it is broader than roads. So I'd have to turn it over a little bit more, but I think the general idea that we need to make sure there's some support so that we can do good planning of CASA's goals and objectives is something that I would be generally supportive of. I don't know if Ms. Flickering would like to weigh in as well as she walks in.
She must have been listening
Perfect timing.
upstairs. Run to the elevator.
Sorry, what was the question?
Well, just discussion about possibly adding a tax element, a levy element that would pay for one-time planning, so that we are not just limited resource running forward kind of fits and starts, as opposed to having professionals help us shape what the best plan could be.
Well, I'm guessing our municipal manager probably tackled the legal question of that, but I
That's right,
think
specific burners
knowing
and
that that this program, we are still sort of stretching it out and doing the planning, that type of flexibility so that we could get projects fully planned, designed to be in the queue and ready to implement when voters pass a CASA bond would be helpful.
So,
Is
sorry
that-
to interrupt. There's some echoing on the mics.
Feedback.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's this little feedback loop. And we're told if you bend the microphones down a little bit, it might be better, but it's also better to just have one mic at a time.
Did I answer the question? I didn't hear.
I think the answer, if I may restate it, is you guys are going to think a little bit more about it. And ideally before the 4th of November, we have some alignment on the question, or at least a response if the answer is, well, we can't really do that right now because of whatever.
Guardrails are on the current use
Yeah.
of the fund. Yeah, because I think the need is definitely there. We've seen that.
Sorry, I keep creating problems by preemptively turning on my microphone to say something and then I'm creating echoing. I think that's absolutely right. We'll think about it. And I think generally our response is having some resources to be, because I'm envisioning this as you're supporting an effort to actually make a sort of a strategic plan for what CASA, what their priorities are. Because I know that the first priorities, like the list as it's been utilized the last couple of years, is just the things that have been noisiest over the last several years about needing attention largely, as opposed to like a comprehensive strategic review of every different asset that helps with access to the park that might be considered for support, and what the desire is if I'm understanding what you're thinking about correctly.
Ms. Barley, you want to talk on that quick?
Yeah, just very briefly, I'll note that this community contemplated and has a draft version of a Chuget's access plan, and that plan was never passed. Similarly, we had a prior Midtown plan years ago that was never passed, and now we're working through it again. So I was not part of that plan. I'm aware of it. My former employer worked on that plan. So I would also encourage going back, because my guess is there's not a lot of access points that have been built, and there was a whole process to do that. So that's a great starting point.
And I'll just add, just to put a code on that the design function can be part of a bond. The planning can't. And so I don't know that we want to lever it too far into the specific items that could be tied to specific projects. And I don't want to raise any high blood pressure talking about the noisiest projects and why and how all of that came to pass. I think we've been over that for 2 years now. And so the concept is a work plan to get through all of that with some professional support for the folks. So yeah, I think you're right on the money.
Yeah, I think we're picking up what you're putting down and we
Cool.
will think about it and
We're getting
circle
real
back.
close to a very workable program if we get this resource on the table. An equitable, workable program. Thank you. Anna, you're up. And thank you for staying, Mayor.
Thank you. I should turn the microphone on now. So this is our proposed bond project map. There you go. It's in the capital budget book.
Just a sidebar, have you noticed or heard about a lawsuit that's kind of emerging, not local, nationally, with IFF and the manufacturers of emergency equipment for price escalations that may not be matching with actual costs? And so something to be monitoring from a budget perspective. I know that's a 5-year out problem, but eyes on.
Big problem though. Okay. So we could now go into our department overview, but I feel like the intro took longer than maybe I had expected it to. And we have a couple of options. We can run through all of the department changes, including the large departments, police, fire, M&O. We can leave those large departments until later in the afternoon when the departments are present, or we can go through the overview really quickly. You can think about any questions you may have for them. It depends on how you want to conserve time or not. I
So
think
an alternative could be that we take 10 minutes to get our lunch, go to
Yep.
the bathroom, do whatever you need to do, and then come back. Instead of a half an hour break, let's just do a 10-minute break and then drive right
departments
through.
through. Yeah, that sounds great.
If anyone objects to that, speak now. All right, so we'll take about 10, no more than 15 minutes to kind of get yourself settled and back and dive back into work. Thank you.